On a cherry picker to light it?
Yeah. That's in the category of, I think Keats has thought that one out. Like there's a whole category of things in my mind that Keats has thought that one out. So yes, we're gonna do. It's not gonna require cherry pick. It like goes up to like the we would need at least a stick. At least
cherry picker to light it.
Oh wait, yeah, here's our. That's how I know I'm successfully online, when I'm reminded that I have to turn that off. The yes, so the so we'll do that. We might have to have a Olympic lighting torch.
There we go.
As long as I don't have to run a marathon before I do it. So with that, we get to return to the Talmud. We made it, I believe, to the beginning of the third daf, the first amud, which is on page 12 of the Koran English edition. Again, like the when one talked about a page of Talmud, the page in Talmud speak, the page is both sides of the page, front and back. And that's a daf. A page of Talmud is front to back, as opposed to in English, when we refer to a page, we refer to just one face of that. Here we refer to both sides, and the amud is like the side of it. So you'll always see references. We are now on, you'll see it says daf 3 amud A. The amud is the side A or B, and the daf is the number of pages. So so again, just for reference, whenever somebody talks about Talmud, they'll refer to the daf and the amud. So it'll say like 39A or 39B or whatever it might be, because the page is front and back of the page. I don't know if anyone else does things that way. I know the Talmud works that way.
Rabbi, did you say we were on 3A in English?
Correct, 3A. So that's on page 12. So page 12 in the Koran edition, 3A, right after the break. Now, what's going on here is that through this discussion of the Shema, they're going to start to go in weird and wild directions. They'll always return back to the Shema, but it's going to go in different places. And for the next while, they're going to be going in different directions. So this is the stream of consciousness aspect of it. So you're going to the comment was made to me that if we talk about the Shema anymore, I would pull out my hair if I had hair. So hang with it. They're always going to return to the Shema. I've given you a taste of some of the back and forth that they can get into. So if the back and forth goes on too long, we'll hit fast forward through it. But what is going to go on here, it's going to set up...
Rabbi, in the Sefaria edition, where are you?
That is
3A.
It is also, if you go to the top of 3A, it's there.
It's 3A.
Yeah, the top of 3A, and the first Kashi of the Rabbi Meir, the English begins the previous Baraita cited Rabbi Meir's opinion. Like, so it should be right at the top of 3A. The Sefaria navigation will go with the Daf and the Amud, 3A. So it should be at the very top. So where they left it is that they were arguing about what's twilight, right? And we talked about this. It's sort of, and which reflects on even current Shabbat practice, right? This period between sundown and when it's dark, when they can't figure out if it's day or if it's night. That twilight period. So does the day end at sunset and the night begins when it's 3 stars? Well, what about that 45 minutes in between? So that's what they're calling Bein Hashmashot. And their debate over that is reflected, again, like still in current practice, where Shabbat begins when the sun hits the horizon and it ends three stars are out. So the day begins early, ends late, and there's like an hour in between of no man's land. That's of course why Yom Kippur is a 25-hour fast, because that we don't know if it's day or night essentially gets codified. They argue about it, but they can't make a decision for 1800 years. And so we fast an extra hour. They're going to argue back and forth about it. But the key thing is, in order to save you from some of the backroom arguments on it, I'm going to skip forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs to the 5th paragraph. And I say the 5th because I think I don't know if it's the same way that I can look at it, I guess. The same way that the Sefaria is broken up. Ad Sofa, but at the top of page 13 in the Quran, Ad Sofa Hashmora. This is, the words in English are in the Mishnah, let me get you 3a. So it's number 4 in it's paragraph number 4 in the Sefaria. Now, the reason I'm skipping here is that they're arguing over Rabbi Meir's opinion and Rabbi Elazar's opinion of how long twilight is. And now we're going to get to this odd thing that was obvious from the start that it was odd, which is, if you remember the Mishnah said that the time for the saying Shema begins when the Kohanim eat, and it ends at the end of the first watch. And at no point in time did anyone ask the totally logical question, what do you mean the end of the first watch? What the heck is that? That is about the Kohanim, but the first watch was never totally addressed. Now they're finally going to say that, what do you mean the end of the first watch? So Ada Sofar Shmora. In Rabbi Elazar said that the time for saying the Shema in the evening ends with the end of the first watch. The modern Quran editor writes in the Mishnah, we learned that Rabbi Elazar establishes that one may recite the evening Shema till the end of the first watch. These watches are mentioned in the Bible as segments of the night, but it must be established into precisely how many segments is the night divided, 3 or 4. Moreover, why does Rabbi Elazar employ such inexact parameters rather than a more precise definition of time? Right, meaning that reference. That's the Tosfot Rosh is a Talmudic commentator. So, like the question is, why not just say halfway through the night, or why not have a clear thing you can point to rather than the end of the first watch? Because who knows what a watch is? The Talmud will ask. So they quote the Mishnah till the end of the first watch. And then the later editor asks, what does Rabbi Eliezer actually think? What does he hold? Typical Talmudic language, your opinion is something that you hold, right? And they always, if you speak with people who spend too much time in yeshiva, they will often use the word hold in ways that that people who don't live in yeshiva don't say. What does he actually hold? What's his actual opinion? Ad sof 4 shot. K'svar 4 masmarot havei halayla lema ad 3 shot. What does Rabbi Eliezer think? If he thinks that there are 3 watches in a night, meaning that the night is divided into 3 separate watches, why not just say till the end of the 4th hour? Because if there are 3 watches in a 12-hour night, then 4 hours per watch. If there are 4 watches or shifts for the guards in a night, then just say 3 hours. Why this weird language of watches, right? So this assumes that there are shifts that people would take on guard essentially in the evening. To this, how many watches are there in the night? And we don't know how many you think there are, and why not just say how many hours there are, right? If you remember last time I mentioned, or it was after class actually ended last time, we went into all the details of halachic times. I feel like it might have been after. Halacha, to this day, divides the day into 12-hour segments and the night into 12-hour segments, 12 equal parts. So an hour of the night in the winter is like an hour and 15 minutes, or could be. An hour of the day in the winter is 45 minutes. An hour, what we would call minutes, and vice versa in the summertime, right? Depending on, assuming that you're in this hemisphere. This is the case. This is how davening times are determined. I actually use them for davening times. The most handy source for this, there is, we mentioned Hebkal last time, which is super useful for Shabbat times and things like that. All the wild times based on this rabbinic system in the Talmud of like dividing the day into 12-hour segments for day and for night is in the Chabad website. You'll notice that you can enter your zip code for Bridgewater, New Jersey. They, based on what we're talking about in the Talmud, like the dawn, when the light first breaks on this day was 5:33. That would be the end of the time to say Ma'ariv, because dawn has broken. When is there sufficient light that we'll talk about when there's sufficient light for beginning davening. They pass that at 6:11, earliest talit and tefillin. When's the actual sunrise? Meaning, when does the sun break the horizon? 7:05. Based on, we'll get to like when the latest Shema in the morning is. Like, when's the latest Shema? 9:24. Like, and again, this is just for here. The et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? When sunset is, nightfall, midnight, and how long is the proportional hour? That rabbinic hour. 45 minutes, 45, meaning that daylight divided into 12 equal parts is about 48 minutes here in Bridgewater today. It'd be different if we were at a different elevation, if we were further inland, depending where we are in the time zone, all this stuff. So all this wild rabbinic stuff, not locked up on the bookshelf of the Talmud, literally available. These used to be super hard to calculate, now super easy.
Rabbi?
Yes. That's, by the way, that's the main thing I use Chabad for, is that page. Especially for Pesach. Yes.
Rabbi, I have a question. Okay, I know that midnight has a significance. I mean, I've heard that people actually get up at midnight, they mourn the destruction of the temple. I don't know if they do now, like the Haredi does that.
I heard him do that. Yeah, so you'll find in different, like arising at midnight, and we'll get to like sort of some of these midnight things. Arising at midnight to daven is in fact a thing in some Haredi circles.
Aren't you like closer to heaven at midnight or something like that? Is some of that what the thought is?
Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, I really think they're like, before electric lights especially, right? Like there's different atmosphere at night, right? In our homes, we don't quite get it with lights and with TV and whatever, but if you like walk out of the house late at night and experience that stillness and that darkness, again, especially a place like Bridgewater, as opposed to if you're in Manhattan, like it's a, you can see that you could access different spiritual parts of yourself in an atmosphere like that. Like that's not hocus pocus. Like that strikes me as totally real, right? Like so they would get up at midnight, and some still do get up at midnight for though now again, so some of the effect is lost if it's as bright in your room as it is during the day. But yeah, we'll see hints of that coming up. Right there, we'll continue along. Next part is Leilam. Rabbi Eliezer, U.S., thinks that there are 3 watches in the night. And you should learn this. Meaning, why does he say watches instead of just till the end of the 4th hour of the night? And again, that hour would be longer in winter, shorter in summer, but like the first third of it, right? He says, De'ika masmarot rakia. Ve'ika masmarot ba'ara. There are watches in the heavens and there are watches on earth. Meaning, we do our dividing of the night into 3 watches here on earth, but it's also done up in the heavens. Betanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, because we have a Baraita, we have a teaching from the time of the Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer said. Shlosh masmarot havei alayla. There are 3 watches in the night. Al kol mismar u'mismar. And then for every watch, Yoshev Kadosh Baruch Hu, Sho'eg Ga'ari, and the mark of every watch is that the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One of Blessing, sits and roars like a lion. Shne'amar, Anai mamarom ishag mima'on kodsho, iten kolo sa'ag ishag al naveu. Because it says in the book of Jeremiah that Hashem, that Adonai roars from on high, from his holy dwelling. He makes his voice heard. He roars mighty over his dwelling place. He cries out like those who tread grapes against all the inhabitants of the earth. So the 3 times it says Yishag, or some version of it. 3 times it says roar. In connection with God roaring at night here. So Rabbi Eliezer says there are 3 times God roars at the night. That marks these 3 watches of the night. There are 3 watches of the night because 3 times God roars. And God is, notice here, this is sort of this wild theological claim. God is roaring like a lion at night. They include in the English here what the Talmud is sort of is going to end up implying, that why is God roaring? God is pained over the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and so God roars at night. So here's your first image, is that God is in the heaven roaring 3 times a night every night. So that's thing 1. Thing 2, next little paragraph. Siman ladavar. And there's a sign in this matter. There's a sign that you can see for it. Mismar Rishonah. In the first, for the first watch, Chamor Noer, a donkey brays. Shniya, at the second watch, Klavim Tzoakim, dogs bark. Shlishit, and the third one, Tinuk Yanuk Misadei Imo, Isha Misaperet Imvala. And for the third sign is that an infant nurses at its mother's breast, and a woman speaks with her husband. Now, what the hell is that? So, that there are watches to the night, that I sort of get, that they had like shifts to guard the city at night. Fine. Then we have this statement that there are watches in heaven as there are on earth, and God roars at each watch. Fine, okay, God roars at each watch. And now we have this sign of what, like, so the question is sort of like, what are these things? Does it mean that a donkey brays like only at like 4 hours into the night and not any other time, but always at that time? Dogs bark only sort of at 8 hours into the night and not at another time. And babies nurse only at this point in the night and not at another time. And a woman starts to converse with her husband only at this time of the night and not at another time. The short answer is who knows, because the Talmud sort of like says this and moves on. There are a few different ideas on it. One is that this could be referring to things that happen in the world, and that he says, donkeys bray, that's the end of the first watch. Dogs bark, second watch. This, it could be that. It could also be some sense of, I have a sense of constellations, that there could be some sort of star thing going on in the heavens, that they think that the sign of the end of the first watch is I mean, this is sort of, it's like Orion's belt or whatever, right? Like and obviously they had somewhat less light pollution than we do. So like so that they would like look up and there was, the dog barking or the donkey braying or the baby nursing. The Could be, but then the last one sort of throws it off, and the wife converses with her husband. Like, I don't know, like that feels less like a constellation. That one feels sort of more realistic. That like the baby sort of like wakes up after not having eaten for a certain length of time, and nurses, and she's awake, and she starts talking with her husband. Like it's sort of like that one feels sort of like a little more realistic as opposed to like dogs only bark at the end of the second watch. I don't know. So it could be something in the heavens. It could be something on earth. But each one of these things has a sign. So that always struck me is that they again, I feel like it's probably constellations. My Kachashiv Rabbi Eliezer. What's Rabbi Eliezer talking about here, really? Tlat masmarot kachashiv, tlat mismarot rizona, simana lama. Why did you give me 3 signs? If there are 3 watches to the night, and I need to know the end of each watch, or if I need to know the beginning of each watch, you don't need to tell me the beginning of the first watch, because what's the beginning of the first watch? Orto. Isof, the evening began. Like, you don't need to tell me if I have 3 watches in the night, how many signs for the end of the watch do I need? If I have 3 watches in the night, how many signs for the beginning of the watch do I need? Right? So this is what they're asking here. Like, why, if there are 3 things, why are you telling me that, why are you giving me 3 signs? Because if you're telling me the beginning, then what do I need a sign for? Because it's night. When night begins, that's the beginning of the first watch. No one needs to be told when the beginning of the first watch is. It's nighttime. Or if you're telling me the end of the watches are these signs in the heavens or whatever it is. Sof masmara achrona lameli simana. Like, why are you telling me the end of the 3rd watch? You know what the end of the 3rd watch is? Day. And the great Aramaic here, Yamamahu. That's right. The word for day in Aramaic is Yamama. Do with that what you will. It's just Yom, right? Just transferred to Aramaic. It becomes Yamama. So like, why are you giving me 3 signs? Because I don't need 3 signs. This seems ridiculous. This is, again, typical Talmudic thinking. You gave me 3 signs, but I only needed 2 because no one needs to be told when the end of the 3rd night watch is, because when it's day, the 3rd night watch is over. I gave the end of the first watch, the beginning of the last watch, and the middle of the middle one. Solve their problem. Or you can say, you could say that he just gave the end of all the watch, and the end of the final watch is unnecessary because it's day. But even so, it's nice to have a sign of things, right? And that's sort of, again, like it's sort of like the sign of day breaking, and again, in the sort of rabbinic world of Talmudic times, like the world they woke up to were essentially their men, like their wives nursing and beginning to speak with them, presumably because like this is like the sort of like it feels like relaxed early morning talk, right? The rest of the day might be chaotic, but like but there's this kind of little bedtime the pillow time conversation that goes on like in the morning while she's nursing, because pregnancy probably frequent. The Lama Nafkamina. Why do I need a sign for the end of the first watch? Lemikra Kashma, Laman Tekane Vetafel, Bloya Dasman, the Kriyat Shema, Amit. Kevan, the Isha Misaperatim Vala, Vichinut Yanuk Misraimo, Lakum Likri. So what does it mean? Well, what if you live in a dark house? What if I'm not living at ground level? What if I'm in the basement apartment and I'm living in a totally dark house? And then I don't know that day is broken. And in that situation, when the baby starts to nurse and the woman starts to speak with her husband, that means it's time to say Shema. So they solve their problem of why do I need the last sign? I also sort of like the sense that as soon as the there's no way out of it. As soon as the wife begins to speak with her husband, the rabbis say, you know what that means? It's time to say the Shema. Sorry, honey, gotta go daven. Right. So note that that's going on as well, maybe unsurprisingly. Now back to this fascinating image. This is, I'm on page 14, it's the second paragraph down. This is a fascinating image that comes up of God roaring. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel, Mishmei Rav. We have a teaching from quite a bit of time later. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel says in the name of Rav. Rav lives long after Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, hundreds of years. So Shalosh Masmorot Havei Laila. There are 3 watches in the night. Just like Rabbi Eliezer said, well, Kol Mishmar Mishmar. And at every watch, Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'sha'ad Ga'ari, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One of Blessing, sits and roars like a lion. Same image as before. God roars like a lion at each watch. But Omer, now we're getting something extra. And as God roars, God says, Oily, woe is me. Oily, God says. She bavnoteim, acharati et beiti, shafati et eichali, vigalti levena mot olam. Woe is me, God roars, for that due their sins I have destroyed my house, I have burned my temple, and I have exiled them among the nations of the world. This is a fascinating moment. Note this wild theology here, that every night, each and every night, multiple times a night, God roars, but God is not roaring like a lion in a power move. Here, God is roaring like a lion in a I don't know if it's self-pity or if it's just
anguish,
wishing, anguish. That's a good word. Anguish. He's anguished over the situation. He's oily. Woe is me that I have that. Like, look. Had to do it. There's no I shouldn't have done it. Had to do it. But because of their sins, them being us, I have destroyed my house. Like, again, note, who destroyed it? God. It's not saying Rome. Like Rome, just a agent of God here. It's not that Rome was too powerful. For their sins, God says, I destroyed it. It might have looked like them. That was me, God says. And I burned my sanctuary. Destroyed my house, burned my echali, my sanctuary. Vigalti, and I exiled them among the nations of the world. That the lack of a temple and Israel in exile, like literally anguishes God every night. And the cry of a lion, which one first would have thought was like a mighty thing to be doing, is around an anguished cry. And the anguish is over our terrible situation.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Just a question. I was actually going to ask a question a page ago before this explanation of why God was roaring, about God has intervened in different ways with humanity, bringing his people out of Egypt with a lot of miracles, the flood with Noah, turning people into pillars of salt. So there's been a lot of different creative interventions to sort of work things out and work out problems. I was going to ask, has there been discussion about why and when God intervenes, and I'm sure that's a big discussion for perhaps, that's a whole class. But in this instance now, is there been discussion as to why God would do something that causes him or herself so much anguish? It seems like being omnipotent and omniscient, that there might be a more creative solution to the problem of his people's sins than doing something, destroying his house, his sanctuary, that's going to cause him to roar thrice a night for eternity.
Right. It's sort of like that's what's fascinating, right? Is sort of like the like they know the theology too. Like, shouldn't God be all powerful? So they're really here. I feel like you get the sense of a like the closest metaphor of a parent who is no longer able to intervene when their adult child makes bad decisions. When you were a kid, I bailed you out. I went and talked with your teacher, Pharaoh, and I smoothed that one out for you. I went and, like bailed you out of the situation when you were young and stupid and did your insert other miracle here. But they really have a sense of, now you're grown up and your decisions are your decisions. And you even see that in that short bit that God roars out there is I can't believe I had to do that to him, but like, but what can I say? Like, God is only as happy as his least happy child, right? He's anguished over it, but you really get the sense of like, this is the way that this is it. Like, you made your bed, you sinned, so I sent Rome.
Tough love.
Yeah, it's like tough love. It's like, you think I want this? I don't, but you guys got to hold up your end. It really is that. So that's so it's sort of it obviously it doesn't have to be your theology or my theology, but notice how fascinating it is. Like that God, who often in the Tanakh comes off as cruel and angry, and God's always cruel and angry. Here, God is the anguished parent who whose kid just like keeps it's just a shalmazel or like keeps getting into trouble or whatever it is, and God cries every night. God literally cries every night, or that we've brought this on ourselves. Like it's fascinating, and like you could like spin out a lot about like sort of like if you and they're not even the worst of the exiles come well after the time of Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel. They're living comparatively easily in Babylonia. They're not persecuted. They're in exile from the land of Israel, but they're fine. You can imagine how helpful this sort of proved over the course of the ensuing centuries as things got worse. We're suffering, and God is suffering with us. We're crying over a situation, and God's crying with us. But I always find like that specific little piece there, like really fascinating. Putting those words in God's mouth. Woe to me, oily, and of course the oi is in it's not Yiddish. Here it is in the Talmud. Many centuries pre-Yiddish. It's Hebrew. The inflection, that's Yiddish. The word is so continuing another beloved story for me, at least. I love this, and if I were just doing greatest hits, this part would be in the greatest hits section. Tanya. The story is taught again from a source contemporary to the Mishnah. Rabbi Yitzchak was much later than the Mishnah. It's a couple of centuries later. We're back to an earlier level. Tanya Mar Rabbi Yossi. פעם אחת הייתי מהלך בדרך. נכנסתי לחורבן אחד מחורבנות ירושלים להתפלל. says, one time, Rabbi Yossi says, one time I was walking along the way, walking along the street, and I entered into one of the ruins that was among the ruins in Jerusalem to daven, right? He's like walking on the road after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. And essentially it's sort of like time for mincha, right? It's time to daven mincha or whatever it is, right? And so he sort of like steps off of the road and into, you can sort of picture these like old stone structures. One of the ruins of Jerusalem, like just sort of so he's out of the way to daven. He's going to say his Amidah. Ba'aliyahu zachor l'tov, v'shmar li al petach, v'imtin li. Tisiyamti tefilati. And along came Elijah, Eliyahu Zachor Latov, Eliyahu of blessed memory. Eliyahu, he's remembered for good. And he guarded me at the entrance, and he waited for me there. Like so, while I'm davening, I sort of sense that Elijah comes and stands at the doorway of this sort of like, otherwise like ruined building. And he waited me out there until I finished my Amidah. Right? This is the sort of like shul game of like, will the rabbi wait until I'm finished with my Amidah before he starts talking again, or before she starts davening again, whatever it might be, right? Like the Eliyahu, being Eliyahu, waits for Rabbi Yossi to finish his Amidah. Nice, right? Lechar tisiyamti tefilati, amar li, shalom alecha, Rabbi. And when I finished davening the Amidah, the tefillah means prayer, but to the rabbis, if they just say tefillah, they mean the Amidah. When I finished my Amidah, he says to me, Shalom alecha, Rabbi. Elijah says to Rabbi Yossi, Shalom to you, my rabbi. Marti lo. So I say to him, Shalom alecha, Rabbi Umori. So I say back to him, so Elijah, I says, Rabbi Yossi says, I says back to him, well, shalom to you, my rabbi and my teacher, right? He adds like a certain extra, an extra word there. He doesn't want to. He wants to make sure that it's clear that he understands he's lower on the organizational flow chart than Eliyahu Hanavi. Marley, and so Elijah says to me, Bini, my son, why did you enter this ruin? Martilo. And so I says to him, Li palo, to daven. Like I needed to say mincha, whatever it was. I went into the ruin. I came off the road to pray. Marley. He said, should have prayed on the road. Martilo. Mitara iti. Shefa yafsik bi ovdei derachim. And he's like, well, and I said to him, well, I was afraid that if I just stopped on the side of the road, I might be interrupted by travelers. I'd be distracted easily if I just like stepped to the side of the road and did it. So I ducked into this, little ruin. And Elijah said to me, it's like, well, then you should have done the short version. Should have sped it up. We'll keep going with the next piece, and then we'll go over and dissect it. Rabbi Yossi says, in that very moment, I learned for myself three things. I learned, don't enter a ruin. And I learned, when you have to daven and you're like on the way, daven on the side of the road. And I learned that when you're davening on the side of the road, use the short version. So there's a lot of things going on here. Starting at the end, if you look in some sidurim, you'll see there's a shortened version of the Amidah where they take all the blessings and collapse them into just a few lines, into like just the kind of the essence of the lines. And in the newer weekday Sim Shalom, the 2001 weekday Sim Shalom that takes, there's a Shabbat Sim Shalom, there's the full one that we have here, there's a Shabbat one, there's a weekday one. The weekday one includes this, the short version that you're supposed to say if they're calling, after the mincha and they're boarding your plane, or if you're on the road and you're worried you're gonna get distracted and you don't think you have 5 minutes for the Amidah, you can do this version in like 1 minute. It's the short version. No, we're not going to use it, but because we're not on the side of the road. I know you guys. But that. So the short version you can find. I think there is a version of the short version in the thicker Sim Shalom, but the short version is in the 2001 edition. Not in the 1985. Like so that don't enter a ruin. Like this is like Elijah appeared in the doorway. It seems to protect him. Like that. There's literally a situation where his presence in the ruin was prone to making it collapse. This is ironically to Joe's question earlier. Like God may not rebuild the temple, but Elijah the prophet is literally like sort of like walking the earth, protecting people from collapsing buildings when they are making an ill-advised stop to daven. Elijah's waiting in the doorway, like literally protecting him, it seems, like from that his presence there could like cause an unstable building to collapse. It is an amazingly pedestrian conversation to have with Elijah the prophet. I don't know if you've ever fantasized about like what would happen if you met Elijah the prophet, but discussing the ins and outs of your Amidah might not have been on the list.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
This seems like real micromanaging here. Is it just because of the notoriety of this sage, or is Elijah running around the world saving every individual from a minor transgression?
Right. What's going on? It's like the Superman thing, right? Like why, like in the Superman movies where like you go around and it's like, really, like you're just like of all the problems in the world, you're saving like this, cat in a tree.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It seems to be that. It's amazing. So one, Elijah pops up every so often. This is our first visit from Elijah in the text, but you're right. I mean, it's a shockingly small thing, especially since we're coming right off of the story of God anguished each and every night over the exile of Israel and the destruction of the temple. God roars in anguish, and Elijah, meantime, is sort of like, Rabbi, can you tighten up the prayers a bit? I mean, come on. Literally, it's so.
Rabbi?
Yes, thanks for interrupting me, Phyllis. That way, no, you're not interrupting. I'm saying, but thanks for asking something because I didn't really have an answer. Go on. Yes, Phyllis, you didn't interrupt. I was
When you say ruin, I don't think of something that's going to fall down, that Elijah would be protecting him. I'm thinking of something that has been destroyed. Yes. And maybe the reason that Elijah is there is because the davener is distracted, cannot be concentrating. Like in the Shema, we cover our eyes so that we should only think of what we're doing. And maybe in a ruin, he looks around and he thinks about what happened here.
Right.
I don't think it's as being protecting him.
Right. So could be like there's no reason to say that my version is better than yours, which is say, and then there's a little note here that is that's more in line with what you said, that like it's a ruin, and like he's like the reason you're not supposed to daven there is that like you'll think about the ruins of Jerusalem and it'll be so sad and so terrible and like this. So I gave you like sort of like where my imagination goes with it, which is sort of like like almost like a burned out pile of stones where the walls are still there, or much of the walls are still there, or things like this. Maybe the roof is gone. So could be that. So the Koran note is closer to what you I think to what you are saying. He's sort of protecting him from himself. I feel like there's just my mental image is of what I described. So that Elijah here seems to be recognizable as Elijah, right? Like meaning like there's no sort of like there's no is this Elijah? Like he knows it's him, but it's a sort of it's not a scary presence or an off-putting presence, right? Like it's not a it's not a ghostly presence. So he clearly is like presenting as a human being, but he can tell. And there's a kindness. Elijah in life, if we remember Elijah in the Book of Kings, is a sharp character and doesn't suffer fools. This Elijah, maybe mellowed out by the centuries, he's been walking the earth, saving people from saying the wrong prayer, is kind. Like he's overly respectful, right? Shalom alecha Rabbi, like shalom, my rabbi, is overly polite for Elijah to say, and the Beni, sort of the son, like there's a warmth and a kindness to him.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm missing the point here, but I see it almost very practical that the message is it doesn't matter where you pray. If there's time to pray, just do it, get it done. And if it has to be short, and that's fine too.
Yes.
You don't have to find a sanctuary, you don't have to do the whole thing, just do something. Yep.
It seemed I actually think that might be what's just being said, which is that but Elijah is the one who's saying it, but sort of like, look, when it comes time to daven, you have to do it. Like you can't get out of it. There's like I was traveling isn't an excuse, and like Rabbi Yossi doesn't try to use that excuse, but like it's almost like don't be too pious. Like don't you have to fulfill your obligation of prayer, but like don't drag it out. You're on the roadside. Like sometimes you just have to get it done. Like it's the equivalent of, sometimes you may express yourself fully, and sometimes you may rush out the door saying, "I love you, honey, bye." And like you're sort of like still saying this thing that you want to say, "I love you, honey, bye," but you're not really saying it in a way that expresses any hint of that emotion in a like deep way. But it seems that you probably like want to have the kind of relationship where you don't miss the opportunity of expressing that, even if it's a sort of like rushed mechanical way. Because you know that if you don't say I love you every day, then it becomes hard to say ever. So it seems to be like something like that, like say it, but if it has to be rushed, say it rushed. Like don't, when you leave the house for work in the morning, be like, "I love you, my dear. You have shared my life with you." Like, don't go in the whole thing. Like, if you're in a rush, it's okay.
Right. Is this a valid way of interpreting these Talmudic verses, or isn't it the way you should be doing it?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely. Rabbi Yossi. The story's going to go on, but Rabbi Yossi, but they inject his voice here, like, and his lessons are pretty pedestrian. They're pretty just like he's just getting that out of it. Don't daven in a ruin, daven on the side of the road, and make it snappy.
Does that invite cutting corners in other areas? Is there a slippery slope here at all? Open to interpretation about when you need to do an abridged version, and does that allow you to cut corners on other things that you should be doing?
They seem comfortable with it, meaning that when you're traveling on the way, seems like a fine category that they're okay with, right? Nobody at their house is going to say it, right? So there's a shortened version, and they're like, the shortened version exists for a reason. And notice his reason. I was freaked out that people would distract me. It's not that he thinks he's necessarily going to get mugged, even, right? You could say that he was like you could get. I was afraid I'd get mugged out of the words, but you certainly don't have to. He's just afraid he's going to be distracted by passersby. So it's like, even for like something small like that, which isn't that big a deal, it's like, yeah, so don't daven all 18, 19 blessings, do the short version. I read all this stuff forward. I read forward like weeks ago and like had all this stuff in mind. And I might have even left I'm proud of myself, left a bookmark on the page in the Sim Shalom. The abridged version is in I did my homework. It is in this edition. There are a couple of different ones, but there is an abridged edition of the Amidah. And it is, and it's shorter, which is to say, it is this version that they print here, based on our section, are the first three blessings as usual, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, etc. The second blessing as usual, Machal Kol Chaim B'Chesed, as usual. The third one, Takadosh Shivchak Baruch Atah Ha'el HaKadosh, and then the middle blessings are all shoved into one paragraph, and then the last three blessings, as usual, Ritzeh, Modim, Sim Shalom. But all the middle, 19 minus 6? The middle 13 blessings are all put into one comparatively short paragraph. So you could do that much faster. So that's page 229, 228, 229 in the Sim Shalom. You'd be excited to hear me call that page. So it is in fact in here. And there's an even shorter version that's in the newer edition. Same Provence, meaning it's also from the Talmud, but it's not printed here. There's even shorter versions in the newer Sim Shalom. So now, by the way, we're not done with Elijah, because if we just had that, it would be a total non sequitur. What we're going to get is more insight into what God is roaring. What Elijah, what's going to happen is that Rabbi Yossi isn't going to let the moment go. He's not going to wasting your three wishes with a genie. He's not going to waste his audience with Elijah on just getting details about the siddur. He's not that much of a schlep. He's going to ask the big questions. He's going to ask Elijah, hey, seen God lately? Like, what's going on up there? So he will ask, and that's what's going to link us to the reason we have this story is that it's linked to the roaring. That once we started on because of the watches, we learned the roaring in heaven. And because of the roaring, we're getting this story, because we're going to get insight into God's thinking in the roaring. And then after that, we're getting to demons. So, because if there are angels, there are demons. And we all know the angels make it into the Siddur, the demons less so, but they're out there in the Talmudic world. So that's where we're going to be next. If you see Elijah, say hi for me. And God willing, we will pick up next time in this spot. It'll be Hanukkah by then. And stay well, stay safe. Tomorrow night we're changing the time for davening. We'll 7 o'clock tomorrow night to allow for we moved it to 6 when people weren't working as much or going out to work as much. Now that more people are out to work, we'll move it to 7 o'clock. Still pandemic standard time. So 7 o'clock tomorrow night, 9 o'clock for Pirkei Avot on Shabbat morning, 9:30 for Tefillah. And with that,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night, all.
Stay well.
This is really easy stuff, Rabbi.
but the Elijah story is, for me, it's totally, the roaring is fascinating, and the Elijah story is fascinating.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.